The reason I almost didn't leave my marriage, it wasn't what most people thought. I think a lot of people thought that maybe I didn't leave sooner because I had financial uncertainty, but it wasn't. It wasn't even the legal complexity. Even though I didn't know what was going to happen, I wasn't scared of it. What I was worried about was my son. He was the first person in my life that I really loved truly and felt truly and unconditionally loved by in return. And the question that I asked myself over and over was, how can I do this to him? That question really kept me stuck. So while I was working through all of these other things, that was really what kept me there as long as I was there. So today, I want to give you something more useful than reassurance. I want to give you an honest answer. Welcome back to Breaking Upward. I'm Rachel Newhouse, and today we're going to talk about children and divorce, specifically what the research actually says about how kids are affected, what helps them, and what actually harms them. And it's not what most people think. Let me start with the research, because it's been badly misrepresented for a long time, to mostly the detriment of women, but also to men who are stuck because of the kids. The study that most people think of when they hear that divorce ruins children was by a woman named Judith Wallerstein. She did longitudinal work that tracked children of divorce over 25 years, and she found significant lasting negative effects in these kids. Her work scared a generation, and I would even argue generations, of parents into staying. The problem is that her study had some pretty serious methodological issues. There was no control group, it was a small and self-selected sample, and there was no separation of divorce from the sustained conflict that often preceded and then followed it. Subsequent and more rigorous research has painted a significantly different picture. The most comprehensive longitudinal research in this area, including decades of work by psychologist Mavis Hetherington, finds that the majority of children of divorce do not have long-lasting negative outcomes because of the divorce. They go through a difficult adjustment period. And then, when the adults in their lives handle it reasonably well, they're okay. Not permanently damaged. They're okay. The actual predictor of harm is sustained parental conflict, not the divorce itself. And I would argue sustained parental conflict can exist in a home with both parents married just as much as it can exist in a divorced family. Children who grow up in high conflict households show higher rates of emotional and behavioral difficulty regardless of whether their parents stay together. Children who experience sustained conflict and then have that conflict end because their parents separate sometimes do better after the separation than before it. The research is very clear. It's not divorce that harms children, it's sustained conflict. If you're living in a high conflict household, leaving may be one of the most protective things you can do for your child. And that was how I felt and what led me to my eventual decision, the real thing that led me there. That doesn't mean that divorce is easy for kids. It's not. What it means is that the quality of how you handle it matters infinitely more than the fact that you got divorced. So let's talk about what handling it well actually looks like. So you always have to use age-appropriate honesty. And I would say beyond age, maturity-appropriate honesty, because there are some kids who are older but lack the emotional maturity to handle things. And I would also say there's some really young kids who are really mature who maybe sometimes we should be a little more careful with because they are super mature and maybe we think they can handle more than they actually can. Children don't need to know everything, and they don't always need to know why, but they might ask that, and that might be important to them at some point. But especially initially, they do need to know what's changing and that both of their parents love them and that what's happening is not their fault at all. This is critical, okay? This is one thing with my son. He's gotten more details over the years from both his father and me about our relationship. But earlier on, I would always just tell him, like, we had problems. It wasn't healthy for us to be together, and we are healthier apart than we were together for you. And that was how I framed it from him when he was very young. We got divorced when he was, I think, 4 years old, or it started when he was 3. We divorced at 4. And so that was where we left it with him during that period was, we didn't get along well enough for this to be a healthy situation for you, but this has nothing to do with you. You are the best thing in our lives. You're the best thing that ever happened, and you are the best thing that came out of this marriage. And I still believe that's true today. For young children, if they're like under 5, you really don't need to explain details to them. They need routine and they need reassurance. If you have two households, keep their bedtimes at the same time between the households. Make sure the same adults are picking them up. Keep this physical environment the same as much as possible. I don't mean having the same bedspreads, but like if they have a twin bed at one house, try to have a twin bed at the other house too. Try to keep things as similar as possible so they feel a sense of safety and security when they're doing these big transitions. Young children don't process narratives, right? They process consistency and they process routine. That makes them feel safe. So keep things as consistent as you can. School-age children, you can just be simple and honest. We've decided to live in different houses. You're going to be with each of us and we're going to love you, and that's not going to change. And they're going to have some questions. Answer them simply and directly without volunteering more information than they ask for. That's hard to do, especially when you have a lot of hard feelings going on too, but it is important. As they get older, like with your preteens and teens, I do think it's really important that you start to treat them with respect for their level of intelligence without burdening them with adult complexity, although I do think they can handle a lot of it. A teenager can really understand that a marriage didn't work without knowing like all of the nitty-gritty details. Like they don't need to know this one thing and this one thing, but it is important. Like I really do believe that kids can handle you saying there was infidelity in our marriage. And that's not healthy for us. Like teenagers do understand what that is, and they understand why that might not be compatible with a relationship. They might be angry about it, and they might take sides temporarily. That's okay, all right? Even if they take a side away from you, it's okay. If you're their parent and you keep loving them through it, give them some space, but maintain your presence too. They will work through it, okay? It's very, very hard to push your kids really far away when you're being honest and open with them about what's happened. Your child doesn't need you to pretend that your marriage is fine. They just need you to be honest with them in an age-appropriate way, a maturity-appropriate way. Give them a consistent routine and give them the message that both parents love them. This is not their fault. Tell them that clearly, tell them that often, and when they have questions, answer them honestly. I will say too, kids do fill in blanks if you leave too big of blanks, right? Like if you say nothing about your divorce or you give them messaging that's confusing, like there was one person who I've worked with who would say things like, the three of us will always be a family. That's not actually very helpful to your kid. You're both going to be their parent, but that's confusing. Well, what does that mean then? If the three of us are still a family, why aren't we living together? I think avoid confusing messaging, but being honest. And this might require you working with a therapist and telling them what you want to say to your child, because maybe there's things you want to say that you shouldn't say, or maybe you need help wording things a different way. So that it's the most beneficial for your child and the least damaging in the long run. So what's actually going to harm your kids is bad-mouthing your spouse, okay? Oh, this is one of the hardest things to go through when this happens to you, when there is, I don't mean saying like they did this to make your relationship end, but I mean using things like the B word about the mom in the situation, or saying he's such a jerk, like using really harsh phrasing about the other person and saying they're so terrible. You can talk about real things that have happened and say, that's not fair and that's not kind. And I'm sorry that that happened to you, or I'm sorry that was said to you. You can feel upset about that as a parent yourself, but just bad mouthing them, calling them a monster, calling them horrible names. This is going to have the reverse effect that you think it's going to. Okay. People think that if they give enough bad information, then the child is going to side with them eventually. I will tell you, you're probably wrong about that. You might be right in the short term. They're going to be very angry when they find out more of the whole picture of the situation. Okay, so be very careful about doing that, because you are likely to look immature to them, and you are likely going to be found out at some point that your side actually may not be completely true. So anyways, when you attack their parent, your child is going to experience it as an attack on themselves as well, okay? Even if everything you're saying is true, even if you're furious and you have every right to be, really try to find another outlet. Have friends who listen to you ad nauseum about what's going on. Just make sure your children aren't that outlet. Now, there's also lots of situations where kids have to deal with horribly difficult things in one or both homes. And I do want to speak to that you can talk to your kid about what that is. Okay. And sometimes it can be helpful to say to your child, this person is treating you that way. That person is talking to you that way. That is not about you. That is about them and about their behavior. And if I've seen this situation where you can say to them, I've experienced that with that person too. I'm telling you, this has nothing to do with you. This has everything to do with how they treat others. It has nothing to do with you. Please also do not use your kids as messengers. Tell your dad this, tell your mom this, instead of communicating with the other parent. Ask your mom when she's picking you up. You're putting them in the middle of conversations that are for adults. That is not their burden to carry. It's worth the discomfort of communicating directly with your ex to avoid putting that on your child. It also leads to confusion because if you are communicating with a child, number one, they can forget what was said exactly. Number two, they're kids and they're people and they might be trying to play the system a little and they might not be communicating accurately. So it is really just not appropriate in any way to be communicating through your child. Okay. Leaning on your children for emotional support is also something that can happen, and it can happen gradually. Usually you're not fully aware of it. You get exhausted. You're sad. Your child's there. They love you. They call this, when this happens, they call it parentification. The research on this is really unambiguous. It really does harm your kids. Your child is not your therapist or your confidant. But I do think there is a difference that you can be honest with your kids about real things going on that they are experiencing, that you are experiencing. There's things that cannot be hidden, right? And if they are experiencing things, it is okay to be honest with them in a way that's appropriate, but they are not your confidant. It's just not appropriate to do things like, why did he treat me the way he did? I'm so heartbroken about that. I can't believe he would do that to me. I can't believe he wouldn't, it's just like, get a therapist, get your friends, call some kind of hotline or something. I don't really care. Call someone else. You can talk to your kids about real stuff affecting the two of you together. I think that's fine, but do not involve your kids in the difficult emotions you're having about your separation. Also, it will backfire, I promise. That being said, your grief is real, okay? I don't want to undermine that, but your child's not your therapist. Those are separate needs. They require separate support. Just don't make your child carry what is yours to carry. Another thing is fighting in front of your children, even if you think they're asleep, even if you think they don't understand, it matters, okay? It matters in a marriage, but it also matters, I think, specifically a lot in divorce. In a marriage, when you fight and then you make up and get back together and are healthy again, I think it's like, oh, this thing resolves. When you have conflict with an ex, there's really no resolution and they don't see the working through of that. So if you have to have a difficult conversation with your ex, have it out of earshot or in writing or on the phone when your child is not present. And while kids may not remember exactly what happened, they do hold it inside somewhere. You also want to make sure that you get professional support for your child if you need to. So there's some signs you might want to watch for, like if they're having changes in their sleeping, eating, or school performance, increased anxiety or clinginess, if they're withdrawing a lot, if their anger is outsized for situations. You can get a child therapist, specifically someone trained in play therapy. I tried this when we were going through the divorce with my ex, and we just honestly could not find a good child therapist. We tried a couple people, and I never felt like my son was comfortable with them. We tried it. I don't know that it was super effective in our situation, but I would say interview many people, see if there's any way for you to see how they interact with your child for a couple of minutes before you commit to therapy with them, because it's also really hard for a kid to keep transitioning therapists too. So having your child get therapy does not mean that you have damaged your child, okay? It's a sign that you're paying attention and getting them what they need. So many parents feel so guilty if their kid needs therapy. The thing is, look, we all need therapy because of our parents in some way, right? Like we have to own that. We're all parenting for the first time. We get one life to live, and this is usually your first go at it. And most people don't have multi-generations of kids that they have in their home. So you're doing this for the first time, you're going to mess some stuff up. I don't even mean mess it up, but I mean, you're going to do things that you wish you hadn't done, wish you hadn't said, wish you could have protected them from more. But really, the thing that matters is how you show up for them. Even if things like this go awry a little bit, make sure you show up for them, make sure you help them, get them professional help if they need it, surround them with other people who love on them too. All of it really matters. Getting your child into therapy during or after a divorce isn't a sign that something went wrong. It's a sign you're paying attention. It's a sign you're getting them what they need. And that is really good parenting. Before I move on from that, I also want to say therapy doesn't fix all. Don't expect to drop your child off at therapy and the therapist to fix everything. And then that's the end. You need to communicate with that therapist. I don't mean the therapist tells you every detail of what they say, but when you're doing therapy with a kid, what really matters is what happens when you go home, right? And how those things are applied. How can I support you if you talk with a therapist? Out of what you're seeing, how can I support my child better? What do I need to do? What can we do about these conflict situations that we're having? How should I handle better? Really, really need to communicate with your therapist. You do not drop your kid off at a therapist and expect that the therapist is going to fix anything for you. Okay, let me come back to where I started. The question of whether you're ruining your child's life. My honest answer after going through it, after coming out the other side, is this. The variable that determines your child's outcome is not the divorce. It's you. How present you are. How consistently you show up. How carefully you avoid putting them in the middle of your problems. How well you take care of your own emotional health so that you have something left to give. Your child will be okay. They're not going to be perfect, but they're going to be okay as long as they have a parent giving them those qualities. And even if they have one parent giving them those qualities, some people have zero parents giving them those qualities. So if you can give those gifts to your child of being consistent, of being present, of being emotionally available, of being supportive, if you can do that, of showing up for them, showing up for their games, showing up for their important things, if you can be consistent with that, they will be okay through it, okay? A child who watches their parent live in a diminished and unhappy version of their life, they're going to learn something from that too. And you also don't want them to think that you have to sort of get through a marriage. You have to just deal with it. And that this is how life is being unhappy all the time. I don't think that's fair or healthy for your kids to them growing up. I asked myself if I was ruining my son's life. What I've learned is that how you navigate the divorce matters infinitely more than the fact of it. Your child's going to take their cues from you. Give them something worth following. Next week, we're going to go into the legal side, how to find the right attorney, what to ask in your first consultation, red flags to watch for, and what your options are if a traditional attorney isn't financially possible for you. If you know someone who is stuck on this question, someone who's afraid of what divorce is going to do to their kids, send her this episode. That fear deserves a real answer. I'm Rachel. This is Breaking Upward. I'll see you next week. This is your reminder from me and Alice that Breaking Upward is not legal, financial, or therapeutic advice. Please seek out a professional for your specific situation